So as you guys know, I have been playing an absolute ton of Warzone, and I'm not gonna lie, I've been loving it. I've been having a great time. Don't get me wrong, the game needs to change a couple of things and I think it would be better, but I love it. I'm having a ton of fun with it. And while I've been playing it, I've been using a whole bunch of different things, a whole bunch of different weapons, trying to decide what are the best things within the game. Now, I've already made a video talking about the best loadouts in the game, and that included different perks, different lethal grenades, tactical grenades, things along those lines. But today, I just wanted to go over what I believe are the 10 best weapons in Warzone. And this list is going to be different than some of the other YouTubers who have done this, just because I don't necessarily agree with some of the weapons that they put on the list, and I think that's completely okay. And I urge you that if you disagree with me, let me know what your favorite weapons in Warzone are down in the comments. Now, I'm also going to be giving you the attachments that I use on all of these weapons that we're talking about today. That way, if you want to use them, you can try it out, and I'll give a little bit of reasoning why for each one. So as I mentioned yesterday, today on the live stream over on Twitch, we are going to be doing an open lobby. So if you want to play some Warzone games with me, check out the first link down in the description. Hopefully I see you there. But without further ado, let's dive into the top 10 weapons. So as far as this list goes, they're not in any particular order, because as far as the weapons go in this game, which weapon you use is going to be dependent on which situation you're in. So I think in Warzone, there's just good weapons. They're not necessarily in any particular order, because it depends what type of gunfight you're getting into. Now, the first two weapons that I'm going to start out with are sniper rifles, simply because I have a sniper rifle on almost every single one of my classes, and the two sniper rifles I am going to suggest are the AX50 and the HDR. Reason being, they are the only two snipers that can get one-shot kills with full armor. Both of them, if you shoot your enemy in the head, it is a one-shot kill. However, I do think one of the snipers is better than the other, and it's not the AX50. The AX50 is still good, and if you want that faster aim down sights time and faster fire rate, use the AX50. But I do think the HDR is better for Warzone, and this is counterintuitive to what every other YouTuber has said about this. The reason why I think the HDR is better is because it has a higher bullet velocity. It doesn't do more damage, it doesn't have more range with that damage, but it has a higher bullet velocity. So what does that mean? It means the bullet drops less over range, which means if you are sniping at someone who is very far away, you don't have to aim way above their head. You just shoot at their head and it hits them. It is that simple. And when I use the AX50, a lot of the time at long range snipes, I have to aim above the person's head, whereas with the HDR, I just shoot at them and it hits them. And that is the major difference between the two snipers. If you want the faster aim down sights time, use the AX50. If you like being able to just point at someone, shoot, click, and kill them, use the HDR. That is the difference between the two. Both are good, and both are good in certain situations, but I prefer the HDR. After this, we have a weapon that you can actually find from looting. You may have noticed while playing this game, most of the weapons that you find are the M13, the SCAR, maybe a Model 680, and the MP7. Out of all of these weapons, the one that I prefer the most is not an assault rifle, which is surprising because there are a lot of assault rifles on this list, but rather the MP7. This gun is just really good. Now, I don't actually have a class setup for this weapon because the only time I use it is when I pick it up off the ground. It's a good gun. It is good over range. It is good up close. It has very little recoil and an insanely fast fire rate. And what you're going to notice while looking at all of these weapons is a couple of things that are really good on weapons are fast fire rates, low recoil, and large magazine size, all of which you can potentially have with the MP7. It's a really good gun, and basically every time I drop in, this is the weapon I'm trying to pick up before I eventually buy a drop kit or a loadout. Speaking of short-range weapons, the next gun that I'm using here is the R90. This is simply the best shotgun in Warzone. It just is. The damage range on it, the amount of bullets you have, the fire rate, and the potential to kill is insane on this weapon. Basically, at very most, you're looking at a 4-shot kill, but most of the time you're looking at a 1 to 2 bullet kill up close. Because you can fire 2 bullets very, very quickly, you're almost always going to win a 1v1 gunfight. And if you do run into a full team, you still have the potential to kill them all, because this is going to drop your enemies faster than any other weapon. The downside is you do have to hit your shots, because after you shoot 2 bullets with this gun, there is quite a long amount of time before that 3rd and 4th shot come out of the weapon, which means the best way to use this weapon is take 2 shots, jump behind cover, take 2 shots, jump behind cover, and most of the time 1 or 2 shots is going to kill that enemy. Now, as far as the class setup I am using on this weapon, it's what you're seeing here. This is the only weapon on this entire list that I don't normally use suppressed, which is insane, because normally in Call of Duty I never use suppressed weapons, but because almost all weapons have monolithic suppressors, you are just going to use that because it enhances your range and keeps you off the radar. Whereas the R90, you're diving right in with that weapon. It doesn't really matter whether or not it is suppressed. You're just going to kill everyone around you. Coming up next, we have a weapon that I almost never use in multiplayer, but in Warzone, it's pretty decent, and that is the FFAL. This gun has one of the best time to kill potentials out of any of the weapons we are going to talk about today. And the crazy part about it is it's absolutely possible to kill someone with full armor in 5 shots. The problem is you have to hit upper body and head shots consistently. If you miss bullets, if you're not accurate with it, it's just not going to do what you want it to do. So if you have a good shot, this is absolutely a weapon you can shred people with. Also, this is a weapon that is still good over range. So it's not going to be like your HDR or sniper or anything like that where it can kill someone in 1 shot. But if you just want to abuse the enemies, you can kind of just select fire this thing at the enemies and just kind of make it so that they can't snipe back at you. Then when you get up close, this thing will absolutely shred them. Even if your enemies have the M4 or something along those lines, this gun will still beat them. But like I said before, you have to be accurate. And that is why I use certain attachments on this weapon to do that. All of my attachments are either about recoil control or staying off the radar. I use that monolithic suppressor on pretty much everything. This weapon's no exception. Everything else I use has recoil control, or the red dot sight is just for me to be more accurate with this weapon. I really like this gun in Warzone, and definitely think even if you played multiplayer and don't like it, you should give it a try. After this, we have one that a lot of you probably haven't tried, because everyone is about using fast firing weapons, and there's a reason for that. We'll get into it in a second. But the next weapon we have here is the Odin. The Odin is actually really, really good, except it sucks up close. So if you're making a class with this weapon, if you're making a loadout, I'd recommend using overkill with either an SMG or a shotgun for those up close gunfights, MP7 or R90 with it. Because the Odin, if you miss a bullet up close, you're going to get destroyed. However, the Odin at mid and long range is phenomenal. It melts people. If you get headshots, it deals massive damage. And if you use the right attachments, like you're seeing on screen here, there is not a lot of recoil whatsoever. And because it has that slower fire rate, even though it does have some recoil, it is super easy to control. So this is kind of like for your mid to long range gunfights with ARs. Like I said, don't use this thing up close. As soon as you miss a bullet, you are in big trouble against any of those close range weapons. So like I said, mid to long range gunfights for this. This class that I'm using here is all about recoil control and using that Colossus suppressor to stay off the map. That is this class. Now coming in right in the middle, we're just going to call this thing the War Machine because that's what I know it from Black Ops. This is essentially a big grenade launcher, and it is insane. Like, this thing is insane. First of all, you pick up rockets and you load them into this thing. That is the ammunition you use, and it's essentially a one-hit kill if you land it anywhere near anyone with any sort of armor. Also, you can do this with it. Now, you can't put this weapon on any class or anything like that. It has to be found inside of chests. As far as I'm concerned, it's the only current weapon that is only found in chests that you can't put in a drop kit, and it's found randomly. I've played about 100 games, and I found it once. This is the only game that I found it. So it's super rare, and it's really, really powerful when you get it. So moving into the top 4 weapons, these are some of the ones you probably expected to be on this list. The first one we got here is the AUG. Now, I've seen other people put this on their top 10 list as the #1 weapon. I truly believe this is not the #1 weapon in Warzone. Don't get me wrong, it's good, just not the #1 weapon. The reason why I say that is because a lot of the gunfights you get into, even with ARs, are at long range. Yes, you can pull out a sniper for those gunfights, but a lot of the time, an AR or a long range weapon is just gonna do better. And the AUG at long range just can't hold its own against an M4, a RAM, or some of these other weapons that we have already talked about. On top of that, up close as an SMG, its aim down sights time, its rate of fire can't keep up with something like the MP7 or the R90, which means at long range and at short range, you will get outgunned with this weapon. The AUG is great, exceptional at mid range. That is where this weapon is good. And that mid-range is quite a long range, but otherwise, you're gonna get outgunned with the AUG. Don't get me wrong, super good weapon still. Just, I don't think it's as good as some people are making it out to be. But if you are using this weapon, there's 2 things that you pretty much have to have on it. Once again, that monolithic suppressor, and then the 50-round 5.56 magazine on the weapon. The 5.56 rounds are actually what make this weapon good. In Warzone, you have to have that on the weapon. The next one we have here is one I personally believe a lot of people are sleeping on, and that is the Grau. Now, the Grau is a newer DLC weapon that you actually have to go into MP and unlock if you don't have it. So maybe some of the free-to-play players just don't have this weapon, and that's why a lot of people aren't using it. But it's a good weapon. It's not the best weapon, though. And there's one simple reason for that. This weapon has good damage, great headshot damage, a fantastic fire rate, but it has a lot more recoil than a lot of the other weapons we've talked about. And even with putting recoil control attachments on this weapon, it still has a little bit more recoil than these other weapons. It just seems like something with the Grau, the recoil control and stabilization attachments just don't do as much as the other weapons. So you can see what class I'm using. It mostly controls the recoil, but I will say this, out of any of the ARs that we're going to talk about, I think shreds the most up close. It's great for short range, great for mid range. It's just when they get a little bit further, it has a little bit too much recoil, unlike the next 2 weapons that we're going to talk about. So I guarantee you have seen this next weapon a ton in multiplayer and a ton in Warzone, and that is, of course, the M4. There's no way getting around it. This weapon is just a beast. We've talked about this weapon before, but the reason why this weapon is so good is it has a good damage profile, a great rate of fire, and just no recoil. Just none. There's just no recoil on this weapon whatsoever. I don't understand it, and it's just a good weapon. So basically with this thing, you're going to use some sort of extended mags, you're going to use a suppressor, and then just more attachments that are going to control more recoil, even though it's not really necessary. You'll also notice that I'm using a GI reflex sight here. I don't like the iron sights on the M4. A lot of people do. If you do like the iron sights, just take off that reflex, throw on a stippled grip. The gun's even better than it is in this class setup. Perfect. Now, this is probably the weapon you have seen the most. For one reason, you unlock it at an early level. You've also probably seen a lot of sniper rifles, but it's for a good reason. The M4 is just really, really good. But it is still not my favorite weapon in Warzone. My favorite weapon is actually my favorite weapon in multiplayer as well, the Ram 7. And basically the Ram 7 is just a better version of the M4. Plain, simple, period. That's the way it is. And really the only reason is because the Ram 7 is the exact same gun as the M4, but with a faster fire rate and a little bit more recoil. Now the good news is it's not extreme recoil. It's recoil that is very controllable, mostly vertical, and with the right attachments, like you're seeing on screen here, you can perfectly control this recoil and even melt people at really, really long ranges. This is my favorite gun in Warzone by a long shot. It is not even close, if I'm being honest with you guys. So if I have to break this down and give you guys 3 weapons I really want you to try on this list that maybe you haven't given a try yet, because I'm guessing most of you have tried out the M4, I really want you to try out the Ram 7, the FFAL, and the HDR. Those are basically the 3 weapons that I think some people are sleeping on, because I think a lot of people are using the AX50, but these weapons are just absolute beasts, and I guarantee you they will make you a better Warzone player. But as always, if you disagree with me, feel free to let me know what your favorite weapons in Warzone are down in the comments. I'm curious to hear what you guys have to say. Also, if you enjoyed this video, if it helped you out, I'd really appreciate it if you hit that like button. It does really help out the channel. And finally, if you like what you see here, want to stay up to date on all my videos, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Make sure you turn notifications on. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and until next time, peace out.
Listen!